The price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. Something is taking your energy, and it may not be the thing you think it is. It may not be your workload, your responsibilities, or the challenges in front of you. It may be the resentment you still carry from years ago, the expectations you never questioned, the endless need to stay informed, stay connected, stay available, and stay concerned about things that have no place in your control. Many people spend decades adding weight to their lives while wondering why every step feels heavier than the last. The Stoics understood a truth that remains just as relevant today. Peace is not found by carrying more. It is found by releasing what was never meant to be carried in the first place. In this lecture, we will explore the hidden burdens that quietly drain your strength, your focus, and your peace of mind, and how Stoic wisdom can help you let them go so you can reclaim your energy, your attention, and your life. Let's begin. Most people never notice the exact moment the weight begins to accumulate. It rarely arrives in a single event that announces itself with clarity or demands immediate attention. It gathers quietly through the years, settling into the mind through disappointments that were never fully processed, conversations that replay long after they ended, expectations that were accepted without question, and worries that became so familiar they started to feel permanent. A person wakes up one day feeling exhausted and assumes the exhaustion belongs to the present moment. Yet much of that fatigue has been traveling alongside them for years, hidden beneath routines, obligations, and distractions. The burden feels normal because it has been carried for so long. Many people in their 30s, 40s, 50s and beyond spend enormous amounts of energy managing things they no longer consciously choose to carry. Old resentments remain active beneath the surface. Regrets continue demanding attention long after the circumstances have passed. The mind revisits unfinished situations repeatedly, searching for different outcomes despite knowing the past cannot be altered. This creates a quiet drain that is difficult to measure because it operates in the background of everyday life. A person may believe they are tired from work, family responsibilities, or a demanding schedule, while a significant portion of their energy is actually being consumed by thoughts that have been repeating for years. The modern world has made this burden heavier. Every day begins with headlines, notifications, opinions, alerts, and endless streams of information competing for attention. Many people carry concerns about events happening thousands of miles away, while still carrying worries from decades ago. The mind rarely receives an opportunity to set anything down. One concern is quickly replaced by another. One controversy disappears and another arrives in its place. The result is a constant state of mental occupation where attention becomes fragmented across dozens of competing demands. This is why awareness becomes the first act of liberation. Before anything can be released, it must be identified clearly. Before a burden can be removed, a person must recognize that it is being carried. Many forms of suffering continue simply because they have become familiar. The mind adapts to pressure the same way the body adapts to weight. After enough time, the burden begins to feel like part of one's identity. A Stoic understands that familiarity does not make something necessary. Epictetus understood the value of attention long before the modern world transformed attention into a commodity. His observation remains remarkably relevant today when he said, "You become what you give your attention to." Every thought repeated daily begins shaping perception. Every grievance revisited strengthens its presence within the mind. Every fear entertained repeatedly begins occupying more space than it deserves. Attention functions like nourishment for whatever it touches. The things that receive the most attention gradually become the strongest forces within a person's inner world. Consider how many concerns occupy the average mind throughout a single day. Some belong to the present moment and deserve consideration. Others belong to situations that ended years ago. Some originate from personal responsibilities. Others are borrowed from social media, television, public arguments, and endless speculation about future events. The mind often treats all of these concerns with equal importance. This creates a condition where mental energy is constantly being spent, without producing greater clarity, wisdom, or peace. The result is exhaustion without progress. Marcus Aurelius understood that inner life ultimately determines outer experience. When he wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts," he pointed toward a truth that becomes increasingly important with age. The quality of life is influenced by the quality of attention. A mind filled with resentment creates a different experience of reality than a mind filled with gratitude. A mind consumed by fear experiences the world differently than a mind grounded in reason. Every thought leaves an impression. Every repeated pattern shapes the landscape of the inner world. This is why carrying unnecessary burdens becomes so costly. They occupy space that could be used for presence, gratitude, creativity, purpose, and meaningful relationships. The problem is rarely that a person lacks enough strength to continue carrying them. The problem is that the burden slowly consumes resources that could be directed elsewhere. Energy spent replaying old conflicts cannot be invested into today's opportunities. Attention consumed by distant worries becomes unavailable to the people sitting directly in front of us. Mental clutter narrows awareness until life begins feeling smaller than it truly is. Many people spend years attempting to solve emotional discomfort by adding something new. They search for another source of motivation, another productivity system, another piece of information, another distraction, another goal. Yet some forms of exhaustion are connected to accumulation itself. The mind becomes crowded. The schedule becomes crowded. The emotional landscape becomes crowded. Every unresolved attachment occupies a seat within consciousness. Every lingering grievance demands maintenance. Every unnecessary obligation requires ongoing attention. Seneca observed this tendency with remarkable precision when he wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The human mind possesses an extraordinary ability to generate problems that do not currently exist. Future disasters are rehearsed repeatedly. Conversations that have not happened are argued endlessly. Possibilities become sources of anxiety despite existing only within imagination. The body responds to these imagined threats as though they are already present. Energy is spent preparing for battles that never arrive. Peace is surrendered to scenarios that remain entirely hypothetical. A Stoic learns to examine these patterns carefully. The goal is not to suppress thought or eliminate concern. The goal is to distinguish between what deserves attention and what merely demands it. Many things compete for entry into the mind. Few deserve permanent residence there. Wisdom involves deciding what is worthy of being carried and what must be set down. Every attachment should be examined. Every obligation should be weighed honestly. Every recurring thought should be questioned with patience and clarity. The hidden cost of carrying everything is rarely visible at first. It appears gradually through fatigue that has no obvious source, frustration that feels disproportionate to circumstances, restlessness during quiet moments, and a growing sense that life has become heavier than it needs to be. The burden often remains invisible because it is woven into daily habits of thinking and reacting. Once it becomes visible, however, something important begins to change. The mind starts recognizing the difference between responsibility and unnecessary weight. The space between those two things is often far greater than most people realize. One of the heaviest burdens a person can carry is invisible. It cannot be seen on the face, measured on a scale or stored in a box, yet it quietly influences decisions, shapes emotions, and determines how much peace is experienced each day. It begins when approval becomes more important than judgment. It grows when a person starts looking outward for permission instead of inward for direction. Years pass, and what began as a simple desire to be accepted slowly develops into a habit of living according to standards created by other people. Many never realize how much of their energy is being spent maintaining an image that was never truly their own. This burden often develops so gradually that it feels normal. A person learns what earns praise, what attracts attention, what gains approval, and what avoids criticism. Small adjustments are made to fit expectations. Certain opinions are softened. Certain ambitions are delayed. Certain interests are hidden. The process appears harmless at first, yet every compromise made against honest judgment creates distance between a person and their authentic self. The distance may be small in the beginning, but years of repetition can make it difficult to remember who they were before the performance began. Modern life has amplified this tendency in ways previous generations could never have imagined. Today, approval can be measured instantly through likes, views, comments, reactions, and followers. Entire platforms are built around visibility and validation. A person can wake up feeling content and within minutes begin comparing their life to carefully curated images presented by strangers. Success becomes something observed rather than something defined personally. Attention shifts away from character and toward appearance. The mind becomes occupied with managing perception rather than cultivating substance. The Stoics understood that the pursuit of approval creates instability because approval itself is unstable. Public opinion changes constantly. Social expectations evolve. Trends emerge and disappear. Groups that celebrate a person today may criticize that same person tomorrow. Building identity upon these shifting foundations creates permanent uncertainty. The mind becomes dependent upon factors that can never be fully controlled. Emotional energy is spent chasing reassurance that never remains secure for long. Epictetus recognized this danger with remarkable clarity. He understood that improvement often requires moving against the current of popular opinion, which is why he wrote, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Those words remain difficult to accept because most people fear misunderstanding. They fear being judged unfairly. They fear appearing different from those around them. Yet genuine growth frequently requires walking paths that others may not understand. The Stoic accepts temporary discomfort in exchange for long-term alignment with truth and reason. Many people delay important decisions because they are waiting for approval that may never arrive. They postpone career changes. They suppress creative ambitions. They remain trapped in unhealthy relationships. They avoid difficult conversations. Beneath many of these choices exists a common fear. What will other people think? The question appears simple, yet it possesses enormous influence. Entire decades can be shaped by the desire to avoid criticism. A person may appear successful externally, while privately carrying the exhaustion that comes from living according to expectations they never chose. The weight becomes even heavier because expectations rarely remain fixed. Once one standard is achieved, another appears. One accomplishment leads to a new demand. One milestone creates pressure for the next. The finish line continues moving further away. Satisfaction becomes conditional upon reaching standards established by forces outside the self. This creates a cycle where effort increases while fulfillment remains distant. The mind becomes trapped in constant evaluation, constantly measuring worth against benchmarks that continue changing. Marcus Aurelius offered a direct response to this problem when he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be one." His words redirect attention toward action rather than appearance. The Stoic does not spend life attempting to convince others of their character. Character is demonstrated through conduct. Integrity is expressed through choices. Virtue becomes visible through daily behavior. The endless effort to manage perception begins to lose its appeal when a person commits fully to living according to principles rather than opinions. There is a profound difference between listening to feedback and surrendering identity to it. Wisdom welcomes useful correction. Growth requires humility. The Stoic remains open to learning from others while maintaining ownership of personal judgment. Every opinion received must be examined rather than absorbed automatically. Some criticism contains valuable lessons. Some criticism reflects another person's fears, preferences, insecurities, or misunderstandings. Clarity develops when a person learns how to distinguish between the two. The people surrounding us also influence how much of this burden we carry. Seneca understood this reality when he advised, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." Relationships shape thought patterns, expectations, and priorities. A person surrounded by constant comparison often becomes more comparative. A person surrounded by endless negativity often becomes more negative. The influence is gradual and frequently unnoticed. The quality of one's environment quietly shapes the quality of one's inner life. This is why releasing the weight of other people's expectations sometimes requires examining who has access to the mind. Every conversation leaves an impression. Every relationship creates influence. Every environment encourages certain ways of thinking. The Stoic becomes increasingly selective about these influences, understanding that attention and emotional energy are limited resources. Time spent seeking validation from people who cannot provide lasting peace often comes at the expense of developing wisdom, character, and self-respect. A curious transformation begins once approval stops functioning as a source of identity. Decisions become clearer. Anxiety begins to loosen its grip. Energy that was once spent managing impressions becomes available for meaningful pursuits. A person discovers that much of the tension they carried was connected to an invisible audience that existed primarily within their own imagination. The need to constantly explain, justify, impress, or prove slowly starts fading. In its place emerges a quieter confidence grounded in conduct, judgment, and the steady practice of living according to values that remain intact, regardless of who happens to be watching. Some burdens remain long after the event that created them has disappeared. Years pass, circumstances change, people move on, entire chapters of life come and go, yet certain memories continue occupying space within the mind as though they happened yesterday. A harsh betrayal, an embarrassing failure, a painful rejection, a decision deeply regretted, or an opportunity lost can remain active beneath the surface for decades. The event itself exists only in memory, yet the emotional attachment continues demanding attention in the present. This is one of the most overlooked sources of exhaustion. Many people are carrying emotional debts they have been paying for years without realizing the account should have been closed long ago. The mind has a tendency to revisit unfinished emotional experiences. It returns to old moments repeatedly, searching for answers, justice, certainty, or relief. Sometimes it replays conversations word for word. Sometimes it imagines alternative outcomes that never happened. Sometimes it examines mistakes from every possible angle, hoping that enough analysis will somehow change the past. Yet the more frequently these memories are revisited, the stronger their influence often becomes. Attention acts like fuel, and every return visit strengthens the emotional connection between the present moment and events that no longer exist. Many people assume they are being responsible when they continue dwelling on past mistakes. They believe constant reflection proves maturity or accountability. Yet responsibility and self-punishment are very different things. Learning from a mistake serves a purpose. Carrying the emotional weight of that mistake for 20 years serves a different purpose entirely. One leads to growth. The other quietly drains energy, confidence and peace, while offering little in return. The Stoics understood that wisdom requires honest self-examination, though wisdom also requires knowing when the lesson has already been learned. Memory itself is not the problem. Memory can be a teacher. It can provide perspective, experience, and understanding. The difficulty begins when memory transforms into a prison. A person becomes trapped within recurring patterns of anger, guilt, resentment, or self-condemnation. The past starts influencing present decisions with disproportionate force. Relationships become shaped by wounds that originated elsewhere. Opportunities are avoided because old failures continue casting long shadows over current possibilities. Life begins shrinking around experiences that should have remained in their proper place. Marcus Aurelius understood the danger of allowing the mind to become overwhelmed by accumulated burdens from the past and anxieties about the future. He advised, "Do not disturb yourself by imagining your whole life at once." Those words offer a profound form of relief because many people carry far more than today's responsibilities. They carry decades of unfinished emotional weight alongside today's challenges. They replay old disappointments while worrying about future outcomes at the same time. The present moment becomes crowded with burdens collected from every direction. Clarity begins returning when attention is brought back to what exists right now, rather than everything that has ever happened. One of the most draining forms of attachment is resentment. A person may continue carrying anger towards someone who has long since moved on. Entire years can pass while the original wound remains emotionally active. Every recollection reignites the same emotional response. The mind returns to the event repeatedly, each visit consuming energy that could have been directed elsewhere. The person who caused the harm may no longer occupy any meaningful place in daily life, yet they continue occupying valuable space within the mind. The burden remains because the attachment remains. Regret creates a similar pattern. Many people carry private lists of decisions they wish they could undo. They revisit crossroads from years ago and imagine how different life might have been if another choice had been made. They compare reality against an idealized version of events that exists only within imagination. The comparison creates ongoing dissatisfaction because reality can never compete with a hypothetical scenario that contains no uncertainty, no complications, and no unforeseen consequences. The mind becomes attached to possibilities rather than grounded in what actually exists. Epictetus pointed directly toward the source of this suffering when he observed, "Man is affected not by events, but by the view he takes of them." This insight remains one of the most powerful tools available for releasing emotional burdens from the past. The event may have been painful, the loss may have been real, the disappointment may have left lasting consequences. Yet the meaning assigned to the event continues influencing experience long after the event itself has ended. Two people can endure similar hardships and carry them very differently because interpretation shapes emotional experience as much as circumstance. This does not mean pretending painful experiences never happened. Stoicism does not ask a person to deny reality. It asks a person to engage with reality honestly. Acceptance begins when energy stops being spent resisting what cannot be changed. The past cannot be revised, negotiated with, or rewritten. Every attempt to mentally renegotiate history creates friction between reality and expectation. Peace emerges when attention shifts away from impossible revisions and toward wise action within the present moment. Acceptance becomes practical because it preserves energy for what remains within one's influence. Forgiveness is often misunderstood in this process. Many assume forgiveness is primarily about the other person. In reality, forgiveness often functions as an act of liberation for the one carrying the burden. Holding resentment requires maintenance. It demands attention. It consumes emotional resources. It keeps old wounds active through repeated engagement. Releasing resentment does not erase accountability or excuse harmful behavior. It simply removes the burden from the shoulders of the person who has been carrying it. Seneca offered a path forward when he wrote, "Begin at once to live, and count each separate day as a separate life." These words encourage a profound shift in perspective. Each day arrives carrying its own opportunities, responsibilities, and possibilities. Yet many people enter the day already weighed down by events that belong to another time. Emotional debts accumulated over decades accompany them into every new morning. The habit becomes so familiar that they forget what life feels like without the burden. A Stoic gradually learns to approach the past with maturity rather than attachment. Lessons are preserved. Wisdom is retained. Responsibility is accepted. The useful remains while unnecessary suffering is released. Energy that was once consumed by endless mental revisiting becomes available again. Attention returns to the people, opportunities, and responsibilities that exist in the present. The mind becomes less occupied with what should have happened and more engaged with what can be done today, allowing old memories to settle into their proper place within the larger landscape of a life that continues moving forward. Never before in human history has so much information been placed within reach of so many people at every moment of every day. A person can wake up and immediately enter a world filled with breaking news, political conflict, financial predictions, social debates, advertisements, entertainment, opinions, and endless streams of content designed to hold attention for as long as possible. The experience feels normal because it has become part of daily life. Yet beneath this constant flow exists a hidden cost that many people rarely stop to examine. The mind was never designed to process an endless stream of stimulation without pause. What feels like harmless consumption often becomes a quiet source of exhaustion. Many people believe their attention belongs entirely to them. In reality, attention has become one of the most valuable resources in the modern world. Entire industries compete for it. Companies spend enormous resources studying how to capture it, hold it, and redirect it. Every notification, headline, recommendation, and alert is attempting to move the mind toward a particular destination. The result is a daily environment where attention is constantly being pulled outward. The person may believe they are choosing what occupies their mind, while countless forces are working to influence those choices throughout the day. The difficulty is rarely found in any single distraction. One notification appears harmless, one article seems insignificant, one short video feels unimportant, one argument online appears easy to ignore, yet the cumulative effect becomes substantial. Hundreds of small interruptions gradually fragment attention. Focus becomes weaker, reflection becomes shallower, stillness becomes less familiar. The mind grows accustomed to constant stimulation and begins struggling to remain at peace when stimulation disappears. This is why the Stoics placed such importance on guarding the mind. They understood that what enters consciousness eventually shapes perception, judgment, and behavior. Although they lived centuries before digital technology, they understood the consequences of allowing external influences unrestricted access to one's inner world. Epictetus captured this principle when he advised, "Be discriminating about what images and ideas you permit into your mind." His words feel remarkably relevant in an age where information arrives faster than wisdom. Every image, opinion, and message leaves some trace behind. The question is whether those traces strengthen the mind or gradually drain it. Many people consume information throughout the day without considering its effect on their emotional state. Outrage becomes a form of entertainment. Fear becomes a source of engagement. Controversy becomes a daily habit. The nervous system remains in a near-constant state of stimulation because the mind is continually exposed to emotionally charged content. Hours are spent observing problems that cannot be influenced and conflicts that cannot be resolved. The result is a growing sense of mental fatigue accompanied by a feeling of helplessness. Energy is expended without producing meaningful action. The modern world often encourages the belief that being informed about everything is a responsibility. Yet there is an important distinction between awareness and saturation. A person can remain informed without becoming overwhelmed. The difficulty begins when information consumption exceeds the mind's capacity to process it meaningfully. News stories blend together. Opinions replace reflection. Reaction replaces contemplation. The mind becomes crowded with information while becoming increasingly deprived of clarity. Attention is consumed faster than wisdom can be developed. Seneca warned against a similar danger long before the arrival of smartphones and social media. His observation that to be everywhere is to be nowhere speaks directly to the fragmented nature of modern attention. Many people are mentally present in dozens of places each day while remaining disconnected from the life unfolding directly in front of them. Their thoughts move constantly between headlines, notifications, distant events, and endless streams of information. Meanwhile, meaningful conversations, simple moments of gratitude, and opportunities for reflection pass unnoticed. Presence becomes increasingly difficult when attention is scattered across countless destinations. One of the greatest drains on peace is the habit of carrying concerns that have no practical relationship to one's daily responsibilities. The mind absorbs distant conflicts, economic fears, social controversies, and hypothetical future problems until it becomes burdened by issues far beyond its sphere of influence. This does not create greater wisdom. It often creates greater anxiety. The Stoic understands that concern should be accompanied by discernment. Every issue deserves consideration, yet not every issue deserves permanent residence within the mind. Attention must be directed carefully because attention ultimately becomes life itself. Marcus Aurelius understood this connection between thought and character with extraordinary clarity. He wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." The imagery is powerful because thoughts rarely remain isolated events. They accumulate, they leave impressions, they shape habits of perception. A mind repeatedly immersed in outrage begins seeing the world differently than a mind immersed in gratitude, purpose, and reason. The content consumed each day gradually influences the emotional atmosphere within which a person lives. This is why protecting attention should be viewed as an act of self-preservation rather than self-denial. Many people think boundaries around information, technology and media represent restriction. In reality, they often create freedom. The mind gains space to think clearly. Reflection becomes possible again. Conversations become deeper. Focus becomes stronger. Peace becomes easier to access because fewer competing forces are demanding attention at every moment. The Stoic recognizes that every invitation into the mind carries a cost, and therefore chooses carefully what deserves entry. There is a profound difference between consuming information and being consumed by it. One creates understanding, the other creates dependency. Many people find themselves reaching for devices automatically during moments of boredom, discomfort, uncertainty, or silence. The habit becomes so automatic that they rarely notice it occurring. Yet silence serves an important purpose. Reflection requires space. Wisdom requires pauses. Clarity often emerges during moments when the mind is no longer being flooded with external input. A person who begins protecting attention quickly discovers how much energy was previously leaking away through seemingly insignificant habits. Endless scrolling loses its appeal. Constant engagement with every controversy becomes less compelling. The urge to react immediately begins to weaken. Mental space starts returning. Thoughts become easier to examine. Priorities become easier to identify. The mind becomes less crowded and more deliberate, creating an environment where attention can be invested into relationships, responsibilities, meaningful work, and the quiet cultivation of inner peace. After enough years of carrying unnecessary weight, a person eventually reaches an important realization. Peace does not arrive through accumulation alone. More information, more possessions, more obligations, more approval, and more mental engagement do not automatically create a better life. Many people spend decades adding responsibilities, commitments, and concerns, while rarely asking what should be removed. The result is a life that feels increasingly crowded despite outward success. The Stoics understood that wisdom is measured as much by what is released as by what is acquired. Every meaningful form of freedom requires the discipline to let go. Letting go is often misunderstood because it sounds passive. In reality, it requires tremendous awareness and strength. It demands honest examination of the things occupying attention, consuming emotional energy, and shaping daily experience. The Stoic does not release responsibilities that matter. The Stoic evaluates burdens carefully and distinguishes between what serves a purpose and what merely occupies space. This process requires courage because many attachments become deeply familiar. Some have been carried for so long that they feel like part of one's identity. Many people assume that a burden must be dramatic in order to deserve attention, yet some of the most draining influences are subtle. A recurring worry, a relationship that consistently creates exhaustion, a habit of comparison, an obligation accepted years ago that no longer reflects current values, a constant need to remain available to everyone at all times. These small drains often escape notice because each one appears manageable on its own. Their collective effect becomes visible only when energy, focus, and peace begin steadily disappearing. The discipline of letting go begins with asking difficult questions. What am I carrying that no longer serves a meaningful purpose? Which worries produce action, and which worries simply consume attention? Which relationships encourage growth, and which relationships encourage depletion? Which habits create clarity, and which habits create distraction? Which commitments reflect my values, and which commitments exist only because I am afraid to disappoint someone? Honest answers to these questions often reveal sources of exhaustion that have remained hidden beneath routine. The Stoics consistently directed attention toward what could actually be influenced. This is why the words of Epictetus remain so powerful. Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. Within that statement exists an invitation to stop carrying responsibilities that never belonged to us in the first place. Much of human frustration comes from attempting to manage outcomes, opinions, circumstances, and events that remain beyond personal control. Energy becomes trapped in endless resistance. Peace begins returning when attention is redirected toward what can genuinely be shaped through thought, character, and action. One of the most practical forms of letting go involves establishing healthy boundaries. Boundaries protect attention, energy, and purpose. They determine what receives access to the mind and what remains outside it. Without boundaries, every demand appears urgent, and every request feels obligatory. A person becomes vulnerable to the priorities of everyone around them. The Stoic recognizes that time and attention are finite resources. Protecting those resources is not selfish. It is an act of responsibility toward one's own life. Emotional discipline also plays an important role in this process. Every day presents opportunities to become entangled in unnecessary conflict, outrage, anxiety, and distraction. The modern world provides an endless supply of emotional hooks competing for attention. The Stoic learns to pause before attaching significance to every stimulus. Every argument does not require participation. Every criticism does not require a response. Every controversy does not deserve emotional investment. Selective engagement preserves energy for matters of genuine importance. As burdens begin leaving the mind, something surprising often occurs. Life starts feeling larger rather than smaller. Many people fear that releasing attachments will somehow diminish their experience of life. The opposite frequently proves true. Energy once spent maintaining unnecessary concerns becomes available again. Relationships receive greater attention. Purpose becomes easier to pursue. Moments of gratitude become easier to recognize. The mind gains space to engage fully with the present, rather than remaining occupied by endless mental clutter. Marcus Aurelius captured this truth with remarkable simplicity when he wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life." Modern culture often promotes the idea that fulfillment exists somewhere beyond the next achievement, purchase, status symbol, or external milestone. Yet happiness frequently becomes more visible when unnecessary complexity is removed. A clear conscience, meaningful work, strong character, healthy relationships, inner stability. These things require attention and cultivation, though they require far less complexity than many people imagine. The discipline of letting go also changes how a person views desire itself. Seneca observed this when he wrote, "It is not the person who has too little, but the person who craves more, that is poor." Endless craving creates endless dissatisfaction, because every achievement immediately creates another target. The mind becomes conditioned to seek fulfillment in what has not yet been obtained. Peace remains perpetually delayed. The Stoic learns to appreciate what already exists, while pursuing worthy goals with balance and perspective. Mortality strengthens this understanding. Every year makes the value of time more visible. The hours invested in resentment, comparison, unnecessary worry, and endless distraction can never be recovered. Life becomes clearer when viewed through the lens of finitude. A person begins asking whether a particular burden deserves a portion of their remaining time and energy. Many concerns that once seemed important lose their power under honest examination. Priorities become sharper. Attention becomes more deliberate. The desire to live meaningfully begins outweighing the desire to carry everything. This discipline is never completed through a single decision. It is practiced repeatedly through daily choices, daily awareness, and daily reflection. The Stoic continues evaluating what deserves attention and what should be released. Some burdens return and require renewed examination. Some attachments reveal themselves gradually over time. The work remains ongoing because life continually presents new opportunities to accumulate unnecessary weight. With each burden set down, however, clarity becomes stronger, purpose becomes more visible, and peace occupies a little more space within the mind.